Welcome to the Up Arrow Podcast with William Harris, featuring top business leaders sharing strategies and resources to get to the next level. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hey everyone, I'm William Harris. I'm the founder and CEO of Element and the host of the Up Arrow Podcast, where I feature the best minds in e-commerce to help you scale from 10 million to 100 million and beyond as you up arrow your business and your personal life. Joining me today is Mike Robinson. Mike is the head of retail solutions and a founding member of the Eighth Notch, T8N. He has over 25 years of e-commerce experience with significant operating roles at companies like Gap. He was the EVP at Macy's, and he has always been a champion for the customer. In addition to his role with the Eighth Notch, Mike keeps himself busy with both nonprofit and public company board service and advises numerous early stage startups. Mike, I've enjoyed chatting with you a little bit before. I'm excited to chat with you now. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, William. I'm really happy to be here. I look forward to this discussion. And anytime that somebody does an intro like that, I always think maybe I'm busier than I think I am. But
probably.
Always room for more.
Yeah, always, right? I want to give a quick shout out to Zach Wiener at the Emerging Insider. He's the one who actually reached out and put us in touch. He was like, "You got to have Mike on the show," and I was like, "Okay, Mike, let's have a chat." And as soon as we chatted, I was like, "Yeah, I agree." Zach, thank you very much for putting us in touch.
Yeah, Zach's a great guy, and I appreciate the way that he makes the connection. I'm glad he found this one.
Yeah. I want to make one more quick announcement, and then we'll dig right into the good stuff. The sponsor here, this episode is brought to you by Element. Element is an award-winning advertising agency optimizing e-commerce campaigns around profit. In fact, we've helped 13 of our customers get acquired, with the largest one selling for nearly $800 million and one that IPO'd. You can learn more on our website at element.com, which is spelled ELUMYNT.com. That said, on to the good stuff. Again, we're talking sustainable delivery, how delivery density is improving e-commerce profits as well as the earth here today. I want to go back in time a little bit. You were at Vista Outdoors, Macy's.com. Now you're into the Eighth Notch. Take me through what is the Eighth Notch and why did you start it?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I appreciate you giving us a chance to talk about the origin story a little bit. It all started with a walk in the founder's neighborhood. And he's in a suburb of San Francisco. And we're walking around his neighborhood, and there are these delivery trucks going by. And he's a logistics guy. I'm an e-commerce guy, so I kind of created a lot of the problems that he had to solve over time. And he asked me, he said, do you see a lot of delivery trucks in your urban neighborhood? Because I live in the city here in San Francisco. Yeah, it's constantly. I'm on a not well-trafficked street other than Ubers and delivery trucks on a constant basis. And he goes, do you think that's sustainable? And from him, he meant sustainability in a business perspective. And I said, it doesn't seem to be, because it seems chaotic. And he goes, I think there's a business in there, and I want to go see if we can look at it. And the thought was there a way to minimize the number of times that a delivery truck comes to your home, but still drops off everything that you order? So don't change the behavior from a consumer perspective in terms of the stuff that they want. And I think we all learned this as we went through COVID, right? That we can have just about anything brought to us, but do it in a more organized and synchronized fashion. And maybe you can minimize the number of times that truck stops there. And whether it's based on days or whether it's based on coordination across retailers, that there was a problem that we felt that there was an opportunity to solve. And what we wanted to do then was go say, did anybody care about this? So we went and we talked to the two largest package carriers in the U.S. You know who they are, and we said we believe that we can build something that will help you. They both said yes, we're interested. One followed up on the phone call, and that's who we're in business with. And over the last few years, we've been working with them hand in hand in terms of being able to bring this capability to light. And it really is, it's a pretty simple conversation, because what it really requires is a change in the thinking about how you use the time in an e-commerce order. Normally what happens is you hit submit order and the clock starts ticking, and the retailer says, I got to pick, pack, and ship that as quick as possible.
Sure.
I got to get it to the carrier, get it delivered as quickly as possible, because we've been conditioned that fast is the most important thing. But what if you use that time a little bit more effectively, somewhere between that 3 to 7 day window, and you use the back end of that to say, are there things already in flight to William's house that I might be able to connect it with and actually, through the predictability of the network, have it enter into the last sort hub, into the back of the truck, and into the delivery truck driver's hands as he walks up to your house with 2 packages and not just one. And what we found is there's a high opportunity just given the volume of what both this carrier does and what the American consumer actually has brought to them on a consistent basis. So I'll pause there before I go any deeper on this.
Well, it's good. I mean, it is a problem, right? And we don't necessarily feel the problem typically as the public receiving the goods. There's a little bit of frustration or at least memes of, 50 Amazon boxes or something sitting on the front doorstep. You're like, what just happened here? But we don't feel that problem intuitively, but there's a problem that we maybe should feel as well, right?
Yeah. I think it's the piece of the puzzle that, I've characterized as the undiscovered country of e-commerce, right? It's we talk about, being better from and I'll take the sustainability angle on this one. Mm-hmm. We talk about better from the materials we use, from the sourcing opportunities, from the energy that we use to create and or operate the facilities. But when we get to this notion of instant gratification is, I've given you my money, so I want my product as quickly as possible. We don't seem to care. There are norms in society that are clearly changing. There are studies out there that are saying if you can match value for value, I'm super interested in, especially on things that I don't need right away. And what we found is working with the carrier is that they said we need to do this, right? We need to get to delivery density because we need to figure out how to shift the economics of our operation, right? We can't just keep building, the entire network to match the constant onslaught. I mean, COVID saw a 30% increase in e-commerce sales, and we've still continued to go in single digits since it. But it was that permanent step function up, and so it's this notion of how do you make, and it's really interesting because it's the end of the process, final mile. How do you make that more efficient that it creates efficiencies throughout the network, both from a financial standpoint and, as I've mentioned, from a carbon standpoint? So we said there has to be more than just technology. You've got to get into the psyche of the problem, right, and break it down. And we offered this kind of innovative gain share model that said every time that a stop doesn't happen, there's multiple dollars saved. Carrier, are you willing to share that with the retailer to incent the right behavior? Because now you're telling them, if you make a change, I'm going to improve your bottom line as well. Sure. And what we found is people are willing to listen to that because when done at scale, it could be pennies of EPS, right? It could be really, really impactful, and especially in a world where carriers are looking at higher costs and they're looking to shift them back to the retailer. The retailer still lives in a world of fast and free, even though we know that nothing is ever free. Here's a chance to be able to offset some of those cost increases. And then you add, and I like to use the retail term gift with purchase, the carbon savings to this. Because again, that every time that truck doesn't stop, the driver get out, have to get back in, move forward and stop again, it's about 800 grams of CO2 that isn't created. And we convinced the carrier to say, we're willing to share that with the retailer as well. So now you've got collaboration happening. And when you've got collaboration happening, I think great things can happen, especially in a world where collaboration hasn't been there. It's like, they don't share information, they don't share forecasts, they don't really do anything other than say, here's everything I got and get it there as fast as you can and do it in as inexpensively as possible. Now all of a sudden you're saying, if I cooperate, I've got financial savings and now I've got a carbon savings. And what might I do with that from a marketing perspective in terms of how do I tell my customers about it, that I'm being a better steward of the earth?
Yeah. You mentioned, what's the term that you mentioned there? Delivery density. Yeah. How does the concept of delivery density impact both the e-commerce profitability as well as the environmental sustainability? Yeah.
It's a measurement that the carriers, live and die by, right? It's effectively saying every time that a retailer has a package delivered, how many other packages are delivered with it, and it's 1 point something, right? Usually, and and what we've seen and what we've heard and what we've seen or has been quoted by one of the CEOs of the major carriers is saying, you move that number by 10%, it's hundreds of millions of dollars of savings, right? Wow. And so it's not a massive movement because of just the sheer scale, right? Sure. When you're talking about close to 6.5 billion packages will probably be delivered by the two major carriers, and you throw the Postal Service and Amazon into that, and you're over 10, right? So that there's a lot of stuff moving constantly, and if you can find a way of orchestrating some of it, and so again, to as I've said, and I'll say it a million times because I repeat myself constantly, is that instead of that delivery driver dropping off 1, he's dropping off 2. Instead of dropping off 2, he's dropping off 3. Instead of coming 5 days a week, he's coming 3 days a week, right? Anytime you do that and you create that delivery density, which is really the holy grail that the industry is chasing here, you unlock just massive, as I've said, financial savings, carbon savings.
So in order to improve delivery density, one of the things we can do is route optimization. Technology is booming in this space. Like, what are some of the things that are happening that are improving route optimization?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that each of the carriers have obviously worked on that a great deal. I mean, right. You hear about the infinite left turn that a UPS driver does, right? In terms of
I hadn't heard about it, but that's interesting.
Yeah. It's. I think there's some mythology that goes on with that as well. I don't think they only turn left. It's not NASCAR, right? Right. Yeah. But it's about figuring out, and the beauty of that is, and actually both carriers and FedEx announced it 2 weeks ago. It is that they're physically holding packages in their final sort hub, waiting for another package to come. So those 2 packages can go in the back of the truck so they can be delivered at the same time. That's a route optimization. You're seeing rural deliveries being minimized, instead of, I'll go there 5 days a week. It just doesn't make sense. I'll go there 2 days a week, right? And so you're seeing that. Sure. Amazon is doing this more than anyone, right? And it's really everything that they've made, Amazon Day and Amazon Delivery Day to be, right? And now you look at it and there's a green leaf next to it, and the green leaf is there, and you click on it and it'll say, hey, if you want to do something good for the earth, click this day because something else will be delivered at that same time. Now the reality is, they're doing it because either something is already coming to your doorstep or something is coming near you, or something is coming on the route that you're on as well. Now, they also do crazy things like I ordered something last night and it showed up at 7 a.m. this morning, which I didn't quite understand. I didn't need it. But there must have been a route optimization that the driver was already coming here. And they said, well, we'll drop this off for Mike at 7 a.m. this morning. But I wasn't quite ready for a package at 7 a.m. this morning. Let's just put it that way.
Were the dogs ready for it, right?
It woke up the neighborhood. Let's just put it that way. So I think I think there's this constant push for that, right? But it's also about route consolidation, right? That I think a UPS driver does on average about 162 deliveries or stops every day. Right. And if you can minimize the amount of space that they have to go in between, or if you could make those stops even deeper in terms of the packages delivered, everything starts to work in the direction of you are orchestrating and synchronizing the volume in a much more logical manner than I think that in most cases today it's chaotic, right? Because you're chasing speed. When you break the back of that behavior, that speed is the only thing, and speed is important, right? For lots of things, perishables. I need something as a gift, et cetera, et cetera. It makes perfect sense. There will always be a space for speed, but it's this portion that sits there that says, I can wait a little bit longer. Take advantage of that, and that's what we're really after.
You're opening this up nicely. There's a quote that I believe is attributed to Jeff Bezos. I don't know if it was exactly the way that he said it, but something of nobody will ever want their package to arrive slower. What role, though, do you think human behavior has in this? Like, are we going to all of a sudden get frustrated or perceive this differently? Or are we going to embrace the idea of improving delivery density somehow?
Yeah, I think there's a changing consumerism out there. I mean, I call it conscious, not consumerism, right? Right. And I don't know if it's my term or it's probably Bezos because he's smarter than I am. But it's this notion that I think that people are waking up to the impact that their choices are having, the implications of buying things and having them delivered to me, right? There's a study that came out last year and it talks about, and it asks these very, very, very direct questions of, is speed the most important thing to you? And the answer was, it depends. And so 3/4 of the people said, if I'm getting more than 5 packages a month, I might consider eco-friendly practices to be important or very important, right? Saying, so they're starting to feel that guilt associated with it, right? But I don't want to feel guilty about the things I buy. I'm just starting to feel guilt around, or I'm trying to think, can I be different about how they're delivered? 87% of that same group said that they are willing to wait longer if it's an eco-friendly shipping. So if you can tell them that something about this is better for the planet, whether it's the packaging, it's the EV vehicle, or in the case of what we're doing, it is synchronizing things together, that they're willing to wait. And then the last piece really talks to that consumer convenience piece. 93% had said, I'm willing to wait longer if I know what the date is, right? And if you can give me a commitment on the date, and I think, and I think about my own life being here in an urban setting, and the disincentive of porch piracy, right? I mean, I've had this happen from Amazon as well, right? I'm supposed to get something, that was supposed to come on Monday, and it shows up on Saturday. But Saturday, I'm out playing golf, right? And so all of a sudden, there's a package being delivered to my house, and a lot of people that walk out of Golden Gate Park up to get lunch or something, that package may disappear. But I thought it was coming on Monday, so I felt very confident on it. So I think if you make that promise, I think people are willing to wait because I know that I've got consistency in the final experience as well.
Yeah, I like that. You and I had talked about this a little bit before, and one of the examples you brought up that I really appreciated was hotels and how consumers are willing to say, hey, yeah, you don't need to clean my room today. Put the sign on the door. My room's good. That's a small step that we can make. So this is a similar thing where people can say, hey, I don't necessarily need my package in 3 minutes. Feel free to take a day or two to get it to me. Is it an opt-in thing? Because you said 3/4 of people maybe there's still a quarter of people just like, no, I want it now. Or maybe there's certain things you're like, no, I need it now. It's my Robitussin, my kid's coughing. Like, no, I need it as soon as you possibly can get it to me. Like, is it an opt-in thing, do you think? Or is it just a thing that needs to be done across the board?
I think it's the reinvention of free shipping, right? Right. I think if I need it fast, I'm willing to pay for it. Right. I mean, next day, 2 day, same day, right. Those are all pay to play services, right? I'm willing to pay an upcharge. But I think that we've tried to make free fast as well, right? And try to, and in many cases, it's a lot of the surprise and delight, right? I mean, you mentioned my time at Macy's. I mean, there was a program where, we had things that were committed within 3 to 5 days, but because of where we had inventory and where it was being shipped to, we could get it there in a day or two. And so we would go down this surprise and delight offer, but the reality was we didn't need to, right? Because the consumer was thinking it's going to be 3 to 5 days. All of a sudden, it shows up 1 to 2, and they might be confused. I think I used this example with you. But one of the last purchases I made at Macy's as I left was the 5 white T-shirts. So I bought 5 white T-shirts. 5 white T-shirts came over 4 days from 3 different locations. And it made no sense to me, right? And so I get the first one, I call customer service. I'm like, where are the other 4? And they're like, well, they're on their way. I get the second one, and I call customer service. I'm like, where are the other 3? And they're like, they're on their way, right? What would have been better is if all of them had been delivered at the same time. And that's one of the options that we have, which is if you have split shipments or things coming from multiple places, that we'll synchronize them to ensure that they're all delivered at the same, even though they're in different boxes and coming from different locations. I think that convenience thing is something that people are driving towards. I love the hotel example, right? Because, when it first started, I thought they were doing it for the planet. I now know that they're doing it for their operational model, right? It makes perfect sense for them to. And I've grown so accustomed to it that I'm just fine because I make my own bed at home and probably don't, and if they're willing to change out my towels, I'm okay. I don't need somebody in my room because sometimes I work in my room as well, right? And so I like the convenience of having that choice and not being kicked out by housekeeping all the time. I think that's what consumers are going to continue to look for is, make it real, make it known, make me understand the implication of it. And that's where I keep coming back to. I think this becomes the invention of free shipping in terms of, you're going to get it free, but we're going to take a little bit longer because we're going to try and do the right thing. If you need it faster, there are these very, very fast options, or there might be a slight surcharge that we would charge you as well. Because most retailers are struggling to make free and fast work. And it's kind of a race to the bottom in most cases. They've done it through inventory, they've done it through their own delivery networks, they've done it through regional networks, they've done it through, like, I had a delivery from a major retailer on DoorDash the other day, right? I didn't ask for it, but all of a sudden, this Giants jersey that I ordered showed up from DoorDash, and I was like, okay, that's great. It was not my expectation. So I think they're chasing problems that they don't need to chase in most cases. And I think there's a smarter way of really thinking about it if you take all of the components into play on this.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. You brought up the 5 T-shirts example, and I like that one too. Similar, but not exactly the same. There's a trend where people will order things from multiple websites, right? Maybe they wanted a white T-shirt, but they're going to order that white T-shirt from 3 different people, see which one comes to them first, and then return the other 2. That's got to be the exact opposite of being healthy for the environment. But, I don't think that this has any way of improving that. But what do you think about the trend, or how could this be improved even through delivery density? Like, is there anything that could be improving this?
Yeah, there are certain things about consumer behavior that I can't take on.
Sure.
Right. I'll be honest with you, I'm probably guilty of that myself. Right.
Sure.
I found the same item in 2 places. One of them gave me free shipping, but I found the other one first. Right. And so I'm going to get that, and then I'll just return it. It's a really interesting question. I think it speaks more to people being educated about the implication of choice, right? Sure. Right. In terms of the choices that they're making and the decisions they're making. I just did another interview recently, and we talked about, is this different on the coast versus the middle of the country, right? In terms of how they think about the environment, right? I don't know. I think so, right? But I think also there are people that I think it's generational as well, right? Right. I think that look, didn't expect to be in my 50s and being an eco warrior. That was not on my bingo card in any way, shape, or form.
Sure.
But I have friends that their kids is like, some of them are absolutely motivated by speed. Some of them are absolutely motivated by the gamification of shopping. Others are motivated by, I want to make the right choice, right? Right. I've taken a want and turned it into a need. How do I do that and not destroy something at the same time, right? How do I get better at my choices? Because I think we all recognize we consume too many things, but my soul was at a retailer, so I never want to change that. I just want to help people consume better. And the original question that you asked around that behavior, I'm not sure I can impact that. I'm not sure this impacts it, unless they were buying from multiple retailers and I was able to bring them together all at the same time and be able to deliver at the same time. That would be a benefit, right? Then I feel less guilty for them.
Sure. So, we've talked a lot about how this significantly reduces carbon impact. This increases efficiency in many different ways. You talked about how this improves the profitability to a point of the carrier and how they can shift some of that back to the brands. Talk to me a little bit more about like the profitability and the incentive to the brand to adopt certain things. Because it sounds like we're kind of agreeing that there's enough people that will probably say, yeah, I can get on board with this. So if they are as consumers on board with it, how does this impact the brand?
Yeah, I think the brand has to recognize, has to make a conscious decision that the cost of e-commerce fulfillment is something they need to change the dynamics of, right? That they're, I mean, in some cases it could be, and again, the carrier that we work with is positioning this in their accounts in multiple strategic ways, right? One is just a straight, I'll give you money back each time you do this. The other one is I'll give you a percentage off every package that you ship if you hit certain thresholds around the delivery density. Others are saying, the surcharges that are coming at holiday, I won't charge you for those because you were leaning in on this program. And others are saying, hey, holiday is a hard time to get your packages delivered. We'll give you strategic allocation during that. And so I think the thing is that it becomes another lever, because I think the conversation has always been the retailer turns to the carrier and says, I need you to go faster and I need you to do it cheaper. And the carrier looks at it and turns around and says, I'm not sure I've got all the tools in order to be able to do that. And I'm starting to run out of that. And frankly, my costs are going up at the same time. Here's a way to change the economics of it and actually turn it into a much more strategic conversation. And I think also it becomes something that could become part of the loyalty discussion as well. Because now the brand starts saying, hey, guess what? I have done things from how I source product, how I manufacture. Now I'm doing it in how I deliver, right? And I can tell you the carbon impact I'm having associated with it. Even if they wanted to take some of the savings that they're getting and give it back to them. I mean, this is how I think Amazon built loyalty around that, right? You would get the digital credit, right? I mean, we did things at Macy's during holiday where it'd be like, look, if you can give us more time, then we'll give you $5 off your next order, right? And people flock to it, right? So there's lots of ways of using it, and it becomes ultimately, I think, a loyalty play as people are doing. I also think, and the one thing I didn't share with you, where we operate right now is in a post-checkout world. The customer isn't involved in this decision, other than that they know they've got a window that something will be delivered in, and we're trying to get to the back part. The real value becomes once you move up into checkout and you enlist the customer. And we've got some retailers that we're working with that are really looking at that as an A/B test for them to start to understand what their customers care about and whether these statistics that I've mentioned before are real or not. And is it true for their consumers as well? And I think people are going to start to use all these tools to start to understand I can save money, I can save carbon, I can create loyalty, I can create stickiness on the brand. This is just another tool.
Yeah. So in the immediate term, from a brand perspective, one of the benefits to them is likely going to be they can recoup some of the costs of that shipping to a point, because that's going to get passed back a little bit to them. The carrier can opt in to do that without negatively impacting the customer experience, especially if they've given a range and they say, hey, it's 2 to 3 days, and now you're going to opt for 3 days instead of 2. Okay, great. So the expectation's still being met. Potentially improving lifetime value of their customers. And I think that would be an important thing to track. I would love to see this, and I don't know if anybody does this, but if a brand listens to this and wants to go ahead and track this as a cohort analysis, I'd love to see the cohorts of those that opted in, because we don't have that right now, but like the cohorts of the people that opt in for a little bit of delayed, more eco-friendly shipping as opposed to as fast as possible shipping, and see if there's a difference in lifetime value. And in the hunch there's probably going to be an increase in LTV there. I like where you're going at, though, where eventually getting this into integrated at checkout, because I can see where that's really impactful. I like that idea that you just said, where it's like, hey, we can give you a credit back on your next order if you're willing to, select the eco-friendly box, versus giving the immediate $1 off right then and there. Because I think, one of the things I talk a lot about is not cheapening your brand, right? Where it's like, if you're just throwing out discount after discount, but if it's this opportunity where it's like to come back and incentivize that way, I like that incentive better.
Yeah. You don't have to tell me about cheapening your brand. I work for Macy's,
sure.
Right. So, I mean, we were the king of the discount, right? We kind of ran out of days on the promotional calendar after a while. It's a really interesting question on how you create LTV, right? And how you really approach that. And I think the levers, and I do believe the levers are changing, right? I mean, I think it's not the fistful of coupons anymore, right? It's the experience, it's what you stand for, it's about service level, and it's about if you want to do something novel as well, right? And if you want to, and this is why I think many of the retailers we're talking about, I kind of push this notion of reinventing free shipping, right? In terms of you could have 2 tiers to it, right? One is you're going to pay a little bit more, but it's less than an express. And the other one is you're going to give us more time to look for something that, would still come into the same time frame that you normally would have, It's just on the back end of that, and we get a chance to actually save some carbon at the same time. And I think people are going to continue to lean in. And again, every retailer is a snowflake, right? And by snowflake, I mean different.
Unique.
Not
Yep.
emotionally challenged. It's just they're going to look at the problem differently and how to assemble it, and that's the beauty. And that was the thing when I was in the buying seat, right? And a startup would come in, and it would be like, how do I put this in? How do I put this tool in my tool belt to be able to assemble my customer experience better? That's what we're trying to offer here as well. This is just the first step towards. And again, if you could see my product roadmap over here, there's about 20 things that we want to do around this very simple problem of changing the conversation around final mile.
I love it. Let's go. I like first step. I also like way out into the distant future. I don't know if you saw the Tesla event last night, but he announced the RoboVan, which he pronounced as what was it, the Robivin or some? I'm still not going to pronounce it the way Robivin, but the RoboVan and things like this, and autonomous taxis and things along those lines. Is there any room for something like that to play into the logistics, where it's like, I think there's some efficiency to be gained from like the robotaxi just model in general. If you've got RoboVans now as well. Do you see a future for that being applied in logistics?
I do. I mean, since San Francisco is kind of the epicenter of the autonomous, Uber killer, right, in terms of
Sure.
Waymo and what's happening out here, and watching myself and my friends adopt, using a driverless rideshare, versus, jumping in a stranger's car, is interesting, right? I think that adoption will help people understand what it means to actually, and I think it's probably just as useful on the delivery as it is on the return side, right? That I think the circularity component of this, is something that's going to be real. And the very, very, very first podcast I did, I was talking to a gentleman in Europe, and he talked about. Is this the beginning of how the U.S. starts to think about smart cities, right? In terms of how do you organize everything so everything is orchestrated and synchronized. I think this concept of autonomous vehicles doing deliveries, doing returns, doing moving people around is the beginning of that, right? Because it's much more organized and much more understood. I mean, I think we all know the chaos of the streets today when it's humans doing it, right?
Sure.
So do you change? I don't want to go down the dark path of whether it's okay to turn this over to Skynet or not, but that's
Sure.
that's a different conversation and a different reference. But yeah, I don't see why not, right? So humans would still need to interact with it, though, right? And I think this was one of the things of when we tried to do smart returns through the TaskRabbits of the world and other companies and DoorDashes of the world. Somebody coming, people were terrified to go to their door because they didn't know the person, right? But if it's an autonomous vehicle as pulled up in front of your house and the door opens and all you need to do is drop in the package or pick up the package, I think people are going to adopt it. Now, what happened? How we move that to you don't have to interact with it, that it interacts with you in some way, shape, or form. I think it's easier than probably flying drones at this point, because I still think flying drones has other challenges to it. Humans have to adopt it first, right? And I think if they adopt it in the rideshare, they're going to find a way to adopt it on the delivery and on the return side.
Yeah, I like that. Let's go on the low-tech version of last mile stuff. You were talking about like we saw a surge in e-commerce in the US here during COVID, and that's, and then it resettled and then it continues on its nice little trajectory there. But we're still at like 17% of total retail sales is e-commerce, whereas China is, I don't even remember the last number, but it's like 85%. It's significantly more. And one of the things they do is they've got a lot more bikes and things like that doing, the last mile. How does that, is that a part of the equation here to improving last mile things, or probably less so as we really get into true scale?
I think it could be, right? I mentioned to you the example where I was surprised when a major retailer delivered something to me by DoorDash, right? Now, it wasn't a bike messenger, right? It was a gentleman in a car, and he was doing food orders at the same time. So they had already figured out, on his route that there was an opportunity to do a retail order and a food order at the same time. And I think that coordination and that synchronization is going to continue. It's delivery density of a different type, right? Right. It's and it's just, it is one vehicle, one person doing multiple tasks and doing it in a straight line instead of, going back and forth to be able to do it. So I think there is, and there's no reason why it couldn't go even, lower tech on that in terms of the type of vehicle as well. Right. And is there a greener? I mean, is there a day that says, Mike Robinson, do you want to have your package delivered by, a FedEx vehicle, or do you want to have it delivered by a bike messenger? And here is your carbon impact by doing one or the other, right? I might choose the bike messenger, right? Pray for his life, but I might have him do it.
Robo-bike.
Sure,
Elon, you heard it here first. Robo-bike. This is the next wave.
Pretty sure he's got it on his roadmap over here.
I'm sure it is.
And he's going to launch one into space as well. So
yeah, right.
I think once and I love the way that you're riffing on that, because I think once you start thinking about what is just this very, very simple, small part of the equation and start thinking through the what if associated with it, it just expands the opportunities. And when you think about it, it's just, how do I make it better? And is there value creation associated with it? All of a sudden you go, yes, there is. Why not this? Maybe that. So I think this is going to continue to grow and continue to take on different flavors just because we got conditioned during COVID to have everything brought to us, right? And even though it's flattened and people have gone back into the physical sites, we still want everything brought to us.
Totally. And that's only going to increase, and it continues to increase at a significant rate. At the current setup, in the way that this is working, especially at the eighth notch, is this just for large entities, or is this something that small businesses can really start participating in as well?
Yeah, I think it's any e-commerce company of any size can do it. We, given the relationship that we have with one of the carriers, and I apologize, I can't name who it is.
It's okay.
We're still under NDA. We tend to deal with the much larger companies, but we're also talking to medium-sized companies that are in the subscription space, right? Because if you think about the subscription model, it's perfectly suited for this, right? Right? You have something coming the third week, you just don't know what day, right? And whether it comes on Monday or Thursday, you don't really care, but it's coming that day. Unless it's medication and things of that nature, you have to time it accordingly. But dog food, dog treats, food services, et cetera. What we found is that the model is deployable across any company. We're obviously trying to get to scale as quickly, so we're dealing with some of the biggest retailers in the U.S., but we're starting to get that next band. And actually, it even works on a B2B space as well, right? So actually works better, if you have, a medical supply company delivering to hospitals, right? Being able to combine that so they're all delivering on the same day instead of delivering over 3 days gives huge opportunity on both sides to make that work. I think the size of the company is obviously just because of who we're in business with. We're going to look at the larger company. The goal would be to bring it down to everyone, right? And the way you would do that is through, jump on this program and there's a different rate structure for you every time that we find the opportunity of being able to connect two packages together. That's where we want to take this to.
Yeah. Let's talk results. Is there any business that you could talk about, even if you can't name their name right now, where you could talk about how this has impacted either bottom line or their carbon offset in some way that you could say, here's some numbers I could put behind that?
Yeah, I can talk in the abstract of, and every one of these we do a simulation for and we do an estimation for, and it's about 15 to 20% of the time that we can find another package to be able to connect it to. And when you explore it, when you extend that out over an annual basis for some of these larger retailers, it's millions of dollars of savings and hundreds of thousands of tons of CO2. We're still relatively early days in terms of the ones that we're operating with. and we're about to go through our first holiday with a couple of major ones.
Sure.
That's what I want to see, right? I want to see the
Yeah.
impact of the big hump, right? And because
Mhm.
I actually think it's the time that probably the consumer is most conditioned, especially if they're shopping early, that they don't need the product right away because they've got to figure out what to do with it, especially if they're shopping for others, right? That they can probably wait a little bit longer, and they've been conditioned to know that the time is going to get elongated out because the network is compressed. So I can't give you specific results, but I can tell you that the promise is very, very, very strong. This time next year, I should be in a much better position to be able to do that. But I also have large retailers that are leaning in pretty hard on this.
Yeah, I like that. You, again, going back to your background here, you were at Vista Outdoors, EVP over there at Macy's. You've learned a lot about growth in general and growing businesses. And while this is maybe a tangent away from shipping and logistics, what's some just good advice that you have experienced or received in just growing businesses in general?
Yeah, it's and I appreciate the question because it's always nice to remember where you came from, right? I mean, I'm not a logistics guy by nature, right? I kind of gravitated there, but I look throughout my consulting experience, throughout my operating experience on the retail side, and my board experience at Vista, failures happen, right? But how do you fail fast and move forward, right? How do you learn from it, right? Look, you got to make sure you're not repeating the same issue over and over and over. But punishment for a first time failure, I think, is a mistake. Versus you gotta dig in and understand what happened and determine how you're going to be better the next time around. Because I think significant growth comes through incremental improvement over time. And you just keep building on it, and those incremental improvements all of a sudden become exponential. And every single business experience I've ever had, I think I've always been better when either who I'm working with or people who are working for me is if we go, all right, that stunk, that wasn't great. How are we going to be better, right? And what did we learn from that so we don't repeat it? It's when you start repeating it, that's when the conversation changes.
Totally. So I heard somebody recently talking about interview questions and how they just hate that people ask the question something along the lines of like, tell me something that you failed at and what you learned from it or something. They're like, I hate that because everybody's going to give like this really, political answer about what's like, I failed at this thing that's really not really a failure, but pat myself on the back. I get it. But like the point behind the question is it's like, if you can't talk about something that you actually just messed up, we all have messed up. And if you can't talk about that, you're probably not somebody that I want on the team anyways, because I need somebody who can talk about that. And at least within our team, we've implemented this idea of like a no fault thing. And I stole this from the hospital. As you can imagine, in the hospital, accidents still happen. And this is very sad, but they do. They amputate the wrong limb, whatever this might be, right? And the only way that those things can be discovered and improved on is if you have like a system where you can say, hey, there's no fault to this. We just need to talk about what this was so we can work through what took place, how we can make improvements. And I think that allows you, like you said, fail fast, but fail forward. I really like that idea because it's like, if you don't have a system in place that allows people to know that they are okay to make that mistake, as long as it's not repetitively that mistake, because that means we didn't open up about it in the first place.
Yeah, no, I want people to try, right? I want them to learn, right? I want them to push, right? I don't want them to be tentative, right? I mean, that there's nothing worse than watching someone who is really smart and really thoughtful, just not sure that they're making the right choice, instead of saying, I will make a choice and I'll learn from the impact of it. And that to me, I think is, I know that was my breakthrough as a leader, right? In terms of just getting over that personal fear of failure, just to say, I'm going to screw up, right? I'm going to screw up, but guess what? I'm not going to do it twice, and I'm going to be a whole lot better the next time around.
Yeah. Yeah. You also got some great advice from the CEO of Macy's at the time you were there. You said, he talked about how you need to think like a customer every day. Like, how does this apply to growth?
Yeah, Terry was James Bond, right? I mean, he was, great looking guy, totally cool under pressure, But the very first thing that he said, and the thing that I heard him say, and he actually changed his title to be Chief Customer Officer over time, was you have to put the customer at the center of everything. And it sounds trite, right? It sounds easy, but when you actually make that your mantra, it changes the way you think, and it causes you. And I can tell you, one of the things that I would do as the head of e-commerce at Macy's is every once in a while I would take one of our customer service calls and reach out to that customer and say, help me understand, what your problem is. And the stories I would hear, William, I mean, they were baffling to me. And what I found out is, in some cases, we thought we were smarter than the consumer and made the experience so darn hard. Or we just had this low fidelity amount of problems that we didn't know about that many of our, I had this one woman who would say, I get your email every Tuesday and I religiously go in and shop. I can't buy anything. And I do it every Tuesday and I still can't buy. And this has been going on for 7 weeks. And I'm like, we need to get to the bottom of this, because you have a fistful of dollars and a fistful of coupons that are trying to figure out how to make this work. And what we found out is we just had browser issues, right? Browser compatibility issues, because we had made our applications so complicated that if you weren't, N-2 on your browser version, it just didn't work. But it was at such a low fidelity threshold that it was 5 to 8% of the time it would fail, and we weren't paying attention to it. And so we started paying attention to that and these small, fine sewing things. And I remember telling Terry also would do this to me where he'd call me up and he'd be like, hey, Mike, I'm going on stage in about 5 minutes. Can you give me 3 things that I should talk about from a e-commerce perspective? And it'd be like, hey, invariably I'd give him 2 or 3 things. And again, he's James Bond, so he was able to figure it out.
He parachutes into the thing.
Yeah, totally. And I couldn't tell if he was using it as a tactic with me or not, but it made me very, very clear that I needed to be on top of my business. But I also needed to be able to explain to him things that were very customer centric, that he would care about, that he would talk to a large audience, because he was always in front of large audiences. And he just loved telling stories about what we were doing. But I think, that is one lesson that has just hung with me. Right. And it's one of the things that Jamie Sapp, who is the founder of the Eighth Notch, he wanted to have a retailer come aboard because he's a logistics guy. He's worked in the retail space, but his bread and butter is the logistics side. He wanted somebody to have the other side of that conversation in mind. And he knows that I also have the other side, which is the consumer perspective. So I think it served me well. And it's something that I constantly think about.
Yeah. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that we really need to discuss when it comes to, logistics and deliverability?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the point, and you brought it up earlier, it's what's going to cause people to adopt, right? Right. And I think the thing that I will always come back to is I think there's this subtle shift that's happening in terms of people understanding the impact of choice. And I think and I've got an op-ed that's coming out pretty soon about the third time that Amazon is creating a major effect in the retail space. That they kind of did this around free shipping, they kind of did this around loyalty, and now this third piece is that they're doing sustainable shipping, because every time you go there, they're trying to figure out how to get you to that Amazon day, right? And now they've got a sustainability message around it, because they recognize that if you pick that day, there's something about the route optimization that's happening, like the gentleman that showed up at 7 a.m. this morning, right? I don't think he came here for Mike Robinson. I think he came here for Amazon. But I think as people get conditioned with that they're going to look for it elsewhere, and they're probably going to gravitate towards brands that are talking about it and offering it and talking about the impact. And definitely as we shift generationally, absolutely, I think that's going to happen. I do come back to the question that the gentleman asked me around the coast versus the middle of the country. I can't solve that, right? But I know the rest of the world is already far ahead of us on this. And when we usually lag the rest of the world by a couple of years on major trends in this space, I think the European trends, the Japanese trends, the Chinese trends are going to push us to think differently about this as we move forward.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair.
Maybe not the Chinese trends.
Okay. So this is a good transition then. I like getting into the personal side of my guests as well. And so I want to learn a little bit more about the person of Mike
Sure.
Robinson. Um, Speaking of not being on the coasts, you didn't necessarily grow up in the big cities though, right? How did your childhood impact who you are today?
Well, I was born in Nebraska, where I spent all of 2 weeks. My parents then moved back to my dad's hometown in upstate Pennsylvania, which is, God's country and dairyland, right? So I grew up in a small town of 3,500 people. Very, the kind of place where you grow up where, it's the classic story of you're kicked out of the house at, 8 o'clock in the morning and you're not expected to come home until, well after the lights go out. Right. I mean, this was a town that had the curfew, fire alarm that would go off at 8:45. Right. And that was kind of the signal to start making your way home. How I survived during that, God knows how, right? But I was part feral and part sole survivor, but we figured that out. I lived in Pennsylvania for a while. I went to Penn State, and then I ended up started working in the Philadelphia area in pharmaceuticals and Johnson & Johnson, a division of Johnson & Johnson, and then got transferred out with an opportunity to help manage a manufacturing facility out on the West Coast in Pasadena, California, learn the business to be able to bring it back to Reading, Pennsylvania, because I'd done the analytics on it that said we were shipping too many things east of the Mississippi and it just didn't make cost sense because of our customer base. So we were going to move the operation back to Reading, help set up that plant, but realized I wanted to live in California. And so I stayed in Southern California. I went into management consulting at that point, where I had a nice 12, 13-year run. And then from there, moved up here to Northern California and jumped into the retail industry and didn't realize that I would fall in love with retail. And that's where I've been ever since, over the better part of the last quarter century.
I love watching the way things just kind of like weave their way in. And it's like, you don't always necessarily start with that in mind, but where you end up finding that passion.
Well, it's so funny you say that because I've given this chat a couple of times to like people just starting out and they'd ask, how did you become the EVP at Macy's? And I said, it wasn't a linear conversation, right? It was, but every single step along the way prepared me for it in some way, shape, or form. And I will tell the story of how that happened. I also feel that's true of how I ended up, getting into corporate board work and also being a startup, co-founder or founding member, at the same time. They couldn't be more different in terms of this very, very strategic approach versus like, doing, I've got, 15 different hats that I wear on a daily basis, with a small employee base of under 15. Right. So, but gratifying in both cases.
Yeah. There's a really good, I don't know who the original quote is, but I usually attribute it to Alex Hormozy. And I quote this often on the podcast because I like it, but I think it applies here too. Which is just that idea. It's like you want your kids to be strong, but you don't want them to go through the things that make them strong. And you want them to be patient, but you don't want them to go through the things that make them patient. And the point is that it's like to be the EVP, to be the CEO, to be the founder, to be the whatever it is that you aspire to be. There are likely skills that you don't have today that you will need in order to be successful there. And the best way to get them is to continue to go through those other challenging moments that is not necessarily going to be a linear path. But you can start once it's unfortunate because it's just 2020 is hindsight, right? Hindsight's 2020, that you look back at your career and you go, oh, I understand how this helped me gain this skill and this helped me gain this skill and this helped me gain this. And that's why I was able to be successful at this.
One piece of advice that I got very early in my career was because I was really nervous about doing a presentation in front of senior folk, and my mentor at the time, Don Colip, he said, Mike, nobody in this room is smarter than you are. They've just got a little more experience, and I share that with just about any really smart person who is driven and has an idea and wants to do something. It's like the only thing that separates you is 15 years of hard knocks, right? Go get those hard knocks and realize that you're going to learn from those. And yeah, they're going to get knocked down every once in a while, but don't don't get disrupted by it, right? Find a way to disrupt because of it, right? So it's something that's stuck with me for a very long time, and it's helped me at different times when I've realized I don't know what I'm doing, right? And I mean, starting a company, we didn't know. Jamie and I didn't know what we were doing, but we decided that we would figure it out, and we found really smart people to help us do it.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Sprechen Sie Deutsch?
Ein bisschen.
All right. I remember you saying you could tell a girl she looked pretty, and that was about all the more that you remember.
I could tell a young woman that she looked nice. I could order 2 beers, and I could ask where the bathroom was. Right, that's about it. all the basics when you're going to Oktoberfest.
Yeah, voice di toilette, right? Like that's an important one you got to remember too. Where's the toilet? I gotta go. What's something that makes you cringe that you're just like, I don't understand what this is or why this exists in the world. The world could live without this.
I look, this is where I'm going to age myself, right? But I think the religion of social media bothers me a great deal. I think social media is something that should be for entertainment, and obviously it's become for business in many cases. But when it becomes your only purpose in life, that makes me cringe, right? And it's a struggle for me to watch, right? I mean, I'm in my late 50s. I have a buddy who is addicted to TikTok, right? I don't understand it, but the algorithm has gotten in his head, right? And literally every opinion that he has, every perspective he has, everything that he finds funny, everything that he finds not so funny,
sure,
he has one source, right? And I don't think that's appropriate. And this world is too diverse and too different, and the notion I had a really eye-opening experience when I was probably my second or third year at Macy's. And it wasn't necessarily social media, but I was in a meeting with my team, and I was spending all my time on my phone answering emails. And one of them looked at me and said, why is what's in there more important than what's in here? They said, we expect you as a leader to be able to look up and meet us in the eye and have a conversation with us. So you answering emails while we're talking to you, is not only disrespectful, but it also says that we're wasting our time. So I do worry about that. I do worry about the ubiquity of social media and the insidiousness of it. I think there's a purpose for it, right? Because free speech and everything else that goes along with that, I'm a big supporter of. But man, I worry about it's the wrong type of machine taking control, and that's what I'm probably concerned. So you ask me what makes me cringe, people who live their life on social media, that's the one that probably bothers me the most.
It's such a hard problem to solve. I think about the word that I would almost use is maybe like culture on demand, right? We have like entertainment on demand, but this takes it beyond that, because it's not just entertainment. It's almost like culture on demand. And if you don't enjoy having conversations with the people that are immediately around you, then you can just go on there and find the pocket of the people that think exactly like you, and you can find the content that is exactly catered to you. And so you never leave that, they talk about this bubble, but you never leave this cycle of this repetitive thought process. And it can be a very damaging thought process that we miss. And I let's say, okay, I'm older now here as well. And so you go back to friend groups, and my friend group, like in high school, was weird. Like there's no reason that all of us should have been friends, but we were, because for whatever reason we enjoyed each other. But now when you can have friends that are just exactly like you, because you could just go online and find those people, I think you miss a lot of growth and development.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think I think it's disingenuous when people believe, but I'm looking at social media, so I'm getting the broadest perspective without recognizing that they've just entered into the echo chamber because it's been curated for them, right? And that's the piece that I struggle with the most, is that I mean, look, how many if you write something, you need to get at least 2 sources to back it up, right? The fact that we tend to take one source as being the only source, And it could be, I mean, and we all know that there's a lot of inappropriate sources out there driving information and driving perspective. So yeah, I mean, I didn't mean to get lost in the commentary of social media, but I think that is the one that baffles me a little bit. It's probably the worst usage of technology that I've seen so far.
Yeah, that's completely fair. Speaking of friend groups that are a little bit different and you're not sure how they all fit together, I understand that you met Jerry Seinfeld one time, and there's a good story to go with that.
Yeah, it's an embarrassing story, and I appreciate you bringing it up. But like many people, yeah, I know. I mean, I still think Seinfeld is relevant, and if the viewers and the listeners aren't, they need to go back and just understand the comedic genius of that show, right? Where you've got these three very disparate stories that somehow come crashing together at the end. It's genius writing. But I was a huge fan, and I was living in a suburb of LA at that point, and the recruiter that had placed me at Price Waterhouse out of industry used to be a former stand-up comic. And he was like, "Oh, I know Jerry really well." And I was like, "Tom, you're not funny. I can't believe you were a stand-up comic." But yeah, he would show me pictures of him and Jerry and him and other comedians. He said, "I'm going to take you to a taping of a Seinfeld show." So we went, we're sitting in the front row, and Jerry comes out and actually warms up the crowd. He comes up and he came right over to Tom and said, "Hey, Tom, how you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, you know Tom?" He goes, yeah. We're going to go down on stage afterwards, and you'll get a chance to meet Jerry and the cast.
Wow.
So I'm watching the show and I'm getting more and more nervous by the moment, right? Because here's this, it's Jerry Seinfeld, forgot. And this was when the show had exploded. It was number one show on television. It was must-see television on Thursday. And so we go down, and he introduces me to Jerry, and unfortunately I freeze and do the classic, "Jerry, I'm your biggest fan." And Jerry gives me one of them. "Oh, nice. And then turns around and walks away. That's my meeting of Jerry Seinfeld. Impression. It was, well, I may have told the story a few times over the years, but yeah, he did the complete dismissive and just walked away. And I'm like, and I turned to my friend Tom, and I was like, "I blew that." He goes, "You have no idea how bad what you blew that." Right? He was like, I had talked you up to Jerry. We were going to go to dinner that night. And because of that awkwardness, Jerry was like, I can't hang out with this guy. So
no. Okay. So you've had some time to think about it since then. If you were going to meet Jerry again today, what would you say differently?
Great show. Great show. Where are we going to eat? Right? Yeah, that's probably. Nice. I don't know. I was so starstruck, and I think it's a really interesting, that notion of fail forward, right? The type of thing. Sure. I stewed on that one for days, right? Yeah, I've asked this question of what would I have done differently, and I think it would have been, say less, smile more type of thing, to quote Hamilton. It was just one of those where I should have just kept my mouth shut, but I babble. I'm your biggest fan. Shake my head.
I like that idea of almost playing it too cool, kind of like what you just said, where it's like you could have almost, return it back to him. Just like he's like, "Oh, hey, this is Jerry." And you're like, "Oh, hey,
yeah, right."
So I'm hungry, and like turn to your friend and you're like, "So I'm hungry. Where do we want to go eat?" Right? Just
tacos.
Blow him off.
Yeah, then that's right. Yeah, Jerry, would you like to join us? We're going out for tacos. Yeah. I mean, in retrospect, and this is, God, we're talking almost 30 years later, right? I could have been a lot cooler, but cool has never been my middle name.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm really good dork as well. I trip and fall into things all the time. But I also like talking to people though about what are areas that they're trying to up arrow in their personal life. So obviously there are things that you're very relentlessly looking at on business and stuff, but you told me one that I thought was the most interesting I think I've heard in a while, which is you have tested out at least 15 different pillows.
You and your team does their research. Yeah. Yeah. I have been, as you get older, sleeping is harder. And I've been chasing a better night's sleep for a long time. So back to social media, the algorithm has learned to offer me pillows, right, on Instagram, right? And I can tell you that I've probably bought 10 to 15. I was just taking a look at the pile of them that are in the bedroom across the hall. Somewhere between 10 and 15 different pillows over the last 18 months trying to find the perfect pillow. And I can tell you, it's usually perfect for a month until I see the next one. And that one sounds better. So I mean, if anybody that is listening or watching wants a recommendation on any of the Instagram pillow trends out there, I'm probably your guy.
Wow. Do you want to give a recommendation right now, or are you like, hold that back?
No, because I don't think I found the right one. I can tell you none of them give you the sleep that the Instagram ad tells you that it will. So, and that may just be my fault more than anything else, right? Right. It could be the mattress, could be temperature, could just be getting a little older.
Yeah, that's fair. Mike, I have absolutely enjoyed getting to know you, learning more about all of the different logistics things that we talked about. If people wanted to work with you or follow you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, I mean, you can find us on LinkedIn at the Eighth Notch, EIGHTHNOTCH. We're at t8notch.com as well. Or you can email me directly at mrobinson@t8notch.com. We are looking for retailers, but we're also open to potentially different business models with software companies that are looking to embed this capability in what they do. That we're talking to a series of them at this point. Our goal is just to get this as broad as we can, right? It's a simple change that we think the higher the adoption rate, the better it's going to be for everyone. And frankly, I'm very intrigued to be able to fulfill our promise of trying to take 100 million tons of carbon out of the system if we can.
Yeah, it's a beautiful goal. Again, thank you for coming on the podcast, sharing your time, sharing your wisdom with us. And everyone, thank you for tuning in. You have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Up Arrow podcast with William Harris. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.